So we are so happy to have this next panel. Fireside chat, not really panel, two of you talking, which I think is just going to be so exciting. The nature of how we work, learn, and live is undergoing a profound transformation. Shalin, Senior Advisor at New America, will delve into how rapidly evolving technology is reimagining every aspect of our lives. From AI to sustainability to shifts within our workplace, this discussion will delve into the ways in which education and the workforce are evolving to meet the demands of the future. I have seen the questions, and it's going to be great. So Shaileen's expertise on workforce technology and policy has appeared in outlets like NPR, Washington Post, World Economic Forum, Financial Times, Forbes, U.S. News and World Report, and on stages at Davos, the UN, the World Bank, and many other scientific associations. He has co-authored a book on science and technology policy, forthcoming in MIT Press. He served on advisory boards, which is actually how Ian and Shalin know each other, including the U.S. National Science Foundation, MIT Science Policy Review, George Washington University's Institute for Public Policy, and Georgetown University's Center for Security and Emerging Technology. He is a graduate of the University of Georgia and, we will forgive him, Arizona State University. You have some ASU fans in here. Ian, who I am now lucky to call a dear friend, is the Vice Chancellor of Workforce Development and Innovation for Pima Community College. His continuing focus is developing and sustaining curricula, programs, and partnerships that help students to be successful participants in the 21st century economy. He works alongside his team to develop innovative programs that have helped people realize their college and career dreams. He also serves on regional, state, and national boards focused on workforce and economic development and has presented at conferences on topics of P16 reform and CTE program innovation at the local, state, and national conferences. So please, if you will join us on stage, Ian and Shalin, we'll get this conversation started.
Thank you, Liz, for that great introduction. And we are so honored at Pima Community College to continue to support the vision of 10 West as we see it grow and grow each and every year, and what it means for our community is going to be impactful over time. One of the things where I met Shalin, and it was true, it's like we have to bring Shalin Jyotishi here, is something that he had an impact on Pima Community College in a way he may not know, so I'm going to briefly tell that story. We are now referring to the way in which we serve our new learners, what we used to be referring to as non-traditional learners, as our new majority learners, because they define the majority of the learners that we serve. But I served on an advisory committee that was led by Shalin, where it was called New Models for Career Preparation. And that term, new models, really was blended with that new majority learners. And so our focus is the new models for new majority learners. And so thank you, Shalin, for another way in which you've impacted Pima. And it's such an honor for all of Tucson to hear from one of my favorite people to talk to in this whole country, if not this whole world. So I've worked with you for some time and have remained impressed with how you weave sometimes seamlessly disparate disciplines, from government policy to workforce development to research and theory to environmentalism, all together into really a cohesive framework for innovation that unites technology, education, how we live, how we learn, and how we work. Talk about that framework and what can practitioners such as myself or even researchers in Southern Arizona learn from how you weave all of these seemingly disparate disciplines together.
Well, first I should say, Ian, thank you very much for having me here. I'm humbled by the very kind introduction. You know, this question of sort of the alignment of technology and social change is really the through line of a lot of the work that we've done at New America, you know, the organization that I come from. And, you know, we frame it as sort of seizing the moment to advance the quest for the renewal of the American promise. I think the moment we're in now, there's a moment of great technological change. We are seeing that at the policy level through the bipartisan re-embrace of industrial policy. Industrial policy is back through the CHIPS and Science Act. But we're also seeing it in the standpoint of sort of social change. We have 5 generations in the workplace working together alongside today. By 2050, racial minorities in this country will comprise the majority. We are seeing a great deal of social change alongside the technological change, the AI wave that we've seen with the advent of ChatGPT, as well as the embrace of industrial policies. So, I was actually asked this last week during a session at the Aspen Institute. We were actually meeting with community college students to learn about their perspectives around the future of work. And one thing that came about from that conversation that is sort of almost changing the way I've been thinking about the dot connecting mechanism between these areas is sort of thinking even beyond the technology and social paradigms that the country is in, and certainly that Arizona is in, and more so to this kind of more fundamental question that the students were raising in our conversations with them, which is, how can we shape a future of work worth working? This came up earlier today in a podcast session that we had here at 10 West, but we have a window of opportunity here with the level of technological innovation and the level of social change that we're seeing to really change things. We spend most of our waking hours working. And if we're not working, we're thinking about working or preparing for work, right? We go through school all throughout K through 12 and post-secondary trying to gain these skills to find jobs. Well, if we're going to be spending so much of our waking hours on earth working, we ought to get something more from it than a paycheck. And that was the message that came about from community college students that we were meeting with at Aspen Institute. So, my North Star has actually shifted a little bit here, to think a little bit about the forest and beyond the tree, and thinking about how we can, maximize the benefits of technological innovation while mitigating the risks to shape a future of work worth working, advancing job quality and working conditions, as well as boosting our, relatively sluggish productivity levels. And supporting business competitiveness globally, sort of the traditional markers of economic success in the U.S. with some of those more personalized themes that I think everyday people think about day to day.
That's amazing. So work worth. Well, I haven't heard that. That's nice. So it really raises the terminology and the framework around quality jobs, which can, in and of itself, at the end of the day, really be transactional about that paycheck. Because oftentimes we talk about it, the work culture and feeling safe and feeling a sense of belonging at my place of employment, and also having a family-sustaining wage, and that's pretty much what most quality job frameworks rely on or are built around. But you're really talking about a deeper sense of purpose, like what am I contributing to my community, to my nation, perhaps to my world through with and through this work? Is that really the level that you see this working going to?
Yeah, absolutely. And it can sound very meta, I think, for policymakers and certainly the economists who tend to think in more traditional frames. No knock against my economist colleagues. But I think if we look at public opinion pollings, that's really what matters to a lot of people. You look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that psychology pyramid that we probably remember from grade school, and the top is self-actualization, being able to feel fulfilled in having an impact, in finding meaning in the work that you do. Think about a kid, what is the most popular question we ask a kid? What do you want to be when you grow up, right? Your identity is tied to the work that you do. So, I think we are seeing a change in, the psyche of the American worker. Some examples: the narratives around the Great Resignation, around quiet quitting, right? The focus on job quality that we've seen at the policy level is in part driven by what many people are feeling all across the country. That's not to say that we can't focus, that we shouldn't divert attention and priority to the nuts and bolts of improving working conditions for people. Research from Martha Ross and her colleagues at Brookings Institution has shown that something like 40% of workers still in 2023 work full-time jobs and don't earn a local living wage. Full-time jobs. We are seeing death of despair in communities all across the country, where the primary reason behind that death of despair due to the opioids epidemic and other developments is because of economic malaise, because of a lack of those job opportunities. We are going to need to focus on ensuring that there are enough jobs. Number of jobs is oftentimes what policymakers like to emphasize in the press release, but also the quality of those jobs that come about. And we do have a window of opportunity right now with, I think, technological innovation as the through line. Two examples, public support for unions is actually at a record high in this country since 1965, according to a Gallup poll from August of this year. 2 in 3 Americans would actually like to see some restoration of union say in the workplace, and that has played out in the technology conversation in Hollywood, not too far from here, right? The Writers Guild of America was striking around AI. It's not that they were against AI, they wanted to ensure that AI led to an advancement of job quality, as well as the boost in productivity and cost savings. We also saw a similar thing with the United Auto Workers strike around electric vehicles and just transition, making sure workers have a place in the green economy as sustainability becomes more important. And I think those are all offshoots of the social changes that we've seen born out of the pandemic, but even before that.
Yeah, there's a lot of great touch points with respect to quality jobs, the technology, the UAW strike and the writer strike, and we're even seeing AI now write pieces of music, and of course I think we're all familiar now with the most recent Beatles release. And so with that, a lot of our learners, a lot of our faculty, staff, even leaders are struggling with how do we keep up? How do we keep pace? It seems that we've built the entire institution of secondary and post-secondary education system in the United States around an age that is no longer with us, whether it's the impact of AI, whether it's artificial intelligence, mobile technology, cloud computing, and the confluence and the power of all of those put together. People oftentimes get worried. They see at first that it was low-level work that is going to replace, like, say, the fast food worker with a kiosk. But now we have entire industries where professionals could potentially have to upskill or reskill, or in some instances could be displaced. For context, in Pima County, the Workforce Investment Board commissioned a research study in 2018 that the University of Arizona conducted that said by 2030, 40% of all jobs in Pima County, whether they are low wage, middle wage, or high wage, would be significantly altered or displaced by automation, artificial intelligence by 2030. And I don't know what the number is now, but we're fairly close, it seems. I'm getting closer to that. What can we do as educators? What can we do as workforce developers and economic developers in the face of these challenges? Because oftentimes people at the local level don't feel like they have the knowledge, skills, or tools to deal with this sort of change. It just seems out of reach. What do you recommend and what do you suggest?
It's a really great question, and I would say it's going to require a change from our education system being structured as a pipeline. You go through K through 12, you might do some training, or you go to college, and then boom, you exit, and then you're done. You carry on with the rest of your career, and you move up the career ladder, relying on on-the-job experience to carry you forward. Moving from that pipeline model to a pathways model in which there are many in-ramps in, many in-ramps out, and then back in. increasingly we are seeing community colleges play a very important role in moving the nation's education and training system from the traditional pipeline model to this pathways model, with lots of inroads and outroads throughout the lifespan, not just in the K through 12 and the early 20s experience. And that is also driven by the social changes in this country, because by 2030, by 2025, sooner, the high school going population in the United States is going to start to decline. So colleges are going to need to think differently in order to serve the new majority learners. Students today are not 20-year-olds sitting on a university quad. They're oftentimes adults over the age of 25 with families and caregiving needs, and they're working. And, sort of supporting this transformation of the community college sector, the 1,200 community colleges all across the country, I think is going to be really key for that. One area where I think it's really exciting to think about community colleges in the context of the future of work is in how they support upskilling for the jobs of the future. Pima launched the very first certificate in autonomous vehicles training here in Tucson a couple of years ago. By the end of this year, a partnership with Intel and the American Association of Community Colleges has brought about at least one AI offering at a community college in all 50 states in response to that need to center community colleges in the upskilling conversation around AI. Amazon is investing in upskilling community college faculty members through their Educator Enablement Bootcamp to gain the skills they need to teach AI. We are seeing federal attention focused on community colleges in ways that we haven't before. The National Science Foundation, the source of all R&D funding in the United States that's not health, that's National Institutes of Health, is really centering community colleges in its transformation following the CHIPS and Science Act. It created the Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships Directorate, which was the first new arm of the NSF in over 30 years. And in one of his first public interviews, Erwin Ganchandani, the inaugural head of this new Technology and Innovation Directorate, which is charged by Congress to see through the regional innovation ecosystem mission of NSF that was enshrined in the CHIPS and Science Act, called out community colleges as the missing ingredient in NSF's strategy to date. And that talk has been followed out by WALK. NSF is investing in capacity building of community colleges to offer new workforce training programs in emerging technology fields. The NSF EPIC program is the capacity building program, for example, and then there's also NSF Excellent, which is a funding pot to support work-based learning opportunities at community colleges and workforce development organizations to support a just transition into the innovation economy. I really see community colleges as being key to, modernizing the U.S. education and training system, moving away from the pipeline to the pathways model, and thinking about how to expand equitable pathways to jobs for the future. We're seeing that level of sentiment from industry, the Intel partnership, the Amazon investments, for example, from the federal government, and we're seeing it from colleges themselves like Pima.
Well, thank you very much. It's our honor to serve our community and to have a great team that allows us to do this work. It would be inappropriate for me to not give a shout out to Missy Blair, who is in the audience, who did the on-the-ground leadership and development of our autonomous vehicle driver and operations specialist program. So thank you very much for that shout out, and thank you, Missy, wherever. It's the lights, Missy. I can't. I saw the hand. And so you mentioned already and it's been nice to get the attention from the National Sciences Foundation. Sometimes overwhelming. We get almost a new grant announcement every week in our inbox, and so we're having to decide which ones we pick and choose and align our efforts toward. But other than the alignment at NSF and the recognition in that respect, and some of the other policies that you've mentioned, or maybe that you already have mentioned, what are some of the exciting policy or regulation or federal department level trends and moves that you are most excited about with respect to education and or workforce development or any other area?
That's a really great question. You know, my background is in science and tech policies, so I tend to look at this from the standpoint of how the United States has approached funding of research and development, and how that connects to sort of the economic development strategy of the nation. I am very excited by the CHIPS and Science Act and the bipartisan infrastructure bill and some of the other federal infrastructure bills that have come about over the past 4 years, because one thing that has come about that's different about this go-round is a focus on democratizing access to good jobs in the innovation economy. The National Science Foundation has launched this Regional Innovation Engines program, a $160 million effort to fund these regional clusters of universities conducting research, working with industry, community colleges, supporting workforce development, really trying to move the locuses of innovation all across the country, not just in Silicon Valley and the Boston corridor where it's traditionally been. And I think that's a really exciting opportunity to ensure that more Americans can benefit from advances in R&D. Congress enshrined 10 technology areas in the CHIPS and Science Act that's serving as the roadmap for the United States moving forward, unless Congress comes up with another list, which could happen, that is really, I think exciting to think about how regions like Tucson can support, some of these innovation ecosystems. And it's not just NSF. At the Department of Commerce, the EDA Tech Hubs program is another federal investment in regional innovation ecosystems, funding consortia of R&D players and education players and technology development players to bring about these new mini innovation economies focused on technology clusters, whether it's battery manufacturing or flexible materials. As these dollars start flowing into communities and as awardees get announced, I think it's going to be a really exciting moment to bring about that transition we talked about from the pipeline to pathways, and also unlocking community colleges as the catalyst for that transformation. It's not just Department of Commerce. At the Department of Energy, the $7 billion Regional Clean Hydrogen Hub selectees were announced just last month. 7 regions that are receiving up to $1 billion each to support the advancement of the emergent hydrogen economy, I think, is another example. That one was funded through the bipartisan infrastructure bill, of how we are in a really interesting moment. These are historic levels of investment. These 3 programs I mentioned are the largest investments in regional innovation ecosystem in American history. This is a significant moment to align technology and talent development and think about how we can prevent what has happened in Silicon Valley in terms of the lack of diversity we're seeing in the tech workforce, even today. That's really where I think community colleges fit into the equation, serving new majority learners and expanding pathways to these new jobs in the innovation economy.
And that's great. Thank you, Shalin. In there you mentioned battery manufacturing among many of the other technologies. And of course, we've had the recent announcement of American Battery Factory building its 2 million square foot gigafactory here for lithium iron, not lithium ion batteries in the United States. And equally, we've had the expansion of Scion, another company locally. And we've been identified by the Arizona Commerce Authority as a potential battery manufacturing hub for the nation, or at least this part of the nation. Many of our workforce and economic development partners in the room are a part of that effort. And equally, that involves sourcing materials and minerals specifically that go into the batteries. They just don't come out of nowhere. And so there is a national debate, or if not an international debate, on electrification, but also some of the practices in the interim period that we must employ in order to get to full electrification. From a policy perspective, how should we be viewing the electrification vis-a-vis battery, or is it among a portfolio of energy means that we should be looking at? And from an education and a workforce development perspective, how should we be thinking about which area we should be focusing most on? Is it the manufacturing of batteries? Is it the installation of wind farms and solar fields? What are your thoughts on what seems to be a binary, but in some contexts could be looked at as a spectrum of mining versus electrification, or mining as a part of electrification?
You know, one of my mentors in the workforce development field was the late Emily DeRocco, who served as Assistant Secretary of Labor in the Bush administration and was also CEO of the Manufacturing Institute of the National Association of Manufacturers. And Emily had this belief that workforce development should be the mechanism for technology deployment. And that is actually an ethos that I think has rung true in a number of different technology areas. I think we should be thinking about the movement to net zero, as close as we can get, that is, with workers at the center of the conversation. This just transition conversation, you know, ensuring that workers have a place in the innovation economy, or that they have pathways, not pipeline, pathways to good jobs outside of the industry that might have been changed too much by advances in technology, I think should be our North Star here. There are some heartening signs. One example, just from the Department of Energy, you know, this $7 billion Regional Clean Hydrogen Hubs program that I had mentioned, you know, there is a requirement to have community benefit agreements as part of all of those 7 hubs, which include a focus on labor engagement. We probably remember from, you know, a couple of years back, well, for the past 2 decades, you know, green jobs is kind of a dirty word in a lot of communities. And I think in retrospect, a lot of the reason why that is the case is because there wasn't enough attention on aligning technology development with talent development. And I think that really is what a lot of communities are going to be grappling with around the question of electrification and mining, is making sure that that transition is actually a workforce development conversation as much as it is a technology development conversation. So, you know, that's what we've been seeing come up in sort of the policy conversations most often. Whether it's around green technologies or around AI, you know, centering workers in the transition, I think, is really sort of the policy imperative. And I think it's something that policymakers resonate with. It makes sense. Voters care about, you know, jobs. Technology ecosystems and technology development, it can all feel very disconnected from the day-to-day experience of people. But people understand jobs and, you know, opportunities. And you know, I hope that in this new era, this 21st century era of industrial policy, that we really, really align technology and talent development. It's there in rhetoric and in legislation, but we need to see it in practice and implementation.
No, that's excellent. What I really enjoy about our conversations, and including the one today, is that you know so much about technology, but you always keep humanity at the center of it, and in this case, the workers. Oftentimes we hear, and I appreciate the differentiation between pathways and pipeline, because we hear oftentimes workforce development in a pathways either two ways. It's a labor pipeline or it's a labor pool. On separate occasions, I give a talk that's the pipeline is broken and the pool is dry. And it's really just to exaggerate the point of what you talked about with respect to the birth dearth. We're already there in Pima County, by the way. And we're already underwater with respect to our birth dearth. And I learned a data point from our Chamber of Commerce CEO, Michael Guyman, the other day that I don't think I'll ever forget. It was right now, in our nation, there are 30 states where there are more seniors in high school than there are first graders, and Arizona is one of them. And that really, if you think about the implications of that in terms of a labor pool, we really have to educate and train the people we have, not the people that are going to be coming to us. And you really spoke about that with respect to the pathways and on and off ramps. But what other implications do you see for the economy with respect to the birth dearth and the fact that on the medical side of all the technology that you're familiar with, it's helping us live longer, which is great on one hand, but we've now had the 2008 recession and we've had the COVID self-induced recession, which has really forced people to be in the workplace longer. What are your thoughts about sort of the confluence of those challenges? And again, how at the community level can we help respond to that for the people that we serve?
Well, one thing that immediately comes to mind is labor participation rates, labor force participation rates. It has not fully recovered from the pandemic. There are many people in the country who are eligible to work who are not currently working. And some of that is by choice, but most of it is not. The labor force participation rate is well below what it should be. So, thinking about workforce development for that population, I think, is also very critical. It's not just focusing about the demographic changes, as you mentioned, but really thinking about the incumbent workforce that's still being on the sidelines. A couple of things that I think are exciting developments in this regard. There seems to be momentum. Well, there's been momentum in the past, but there seems to be substantive momentum in expanding apprenticeship opportunities for adult learners. There is also a movement to expand apprenticeship opportunities for high school students, youth apprenticeships, in which you take the best of dual enrollment, usually at a community college, and the best of an apprenticeship program. We are seeing examples of apprenticeships being deployed in AI, including with community colleges. As a matter of fact, Open Classroom is partnering with the California Community College System to create apprenticeship pathways in emerging technology fields with a specific focus on serving the disconnected workers who are on the sidelines. And I think that's going to be really, really important because, there's ripple effects for adults being out of the labor force that go beyond sort of filling labor market needs that I think are going to be really important in moving forward around some of these different technology domain areas as well as traditional industries. So there's a movement led by Apprenticeship for America. Conflict of interest disclosure. I'm on the advisory committee for that group, but I really believe in the mission. It's founded by Ryan Craig, a venture capitalist, and it's to rally around public investments in apprenticeship intermediaries, where I think community colleges can also play a really exciting role. Community colleges as apprenticeship intermediaries to serve the new majority learners. We are having an event at Trident Tech Community College in a couple of weeks where we are convening community colleges who have done this, who have created apprenticeship programs to serve adults in traditional incumbent fields as well as new technology fields. So the UK invests significantly in apprenticeship intermediaries, which is why in the UK you can become an accountant through an apprenticeship program. You can't do that here in the United States. I think this movement around apprenticeships is really one to watch as we talk about the future of work and community college innovation.
We at Pima absolutely agree, and I think we've talked a little bit about this, but the room may not know that Pima Community College is the first community college in the state of Arizona to not only provide related technical instruction for registered and non-registered apprenticeships, but we can also design, develop, and implement, AKA sponsor, apprenticeships. So any companies who are interested in that, let us know. And a shout out to Denise Kingman, one of our directors who helped lead that effort. She's not here today. But the amazing thing about apprenticeships is it really is contextualizing the learning in the most relevant place on the job. And adult learners really like it because now it helps blur the distinction between what is work and what is learning, and also breaks the paradigm that perhaps for many decades was too central to higher education, which is that learning occurs on campus and working occurs off campus. So we're blurring the distinction, but what other forms of teaching and learning are you seeing on the horizon, and perhaps with the assistance of some of these technologies that we're talking about, that can really, this one's not on the question list, so I'll be interested. What do you see with respect to the impact of andragogy, of teaching and learning, and how we help people learn better, or we help instructors teach better? What do you see with respect to other forms of ways we can enhance the learning experience?
I think the apprenticeship model is the gold standard of workforce education because it's the closest coupling between an employer and the educator. I have a controversial opinion around the use of technology in workforce development, and that's that if the technology is not used in the employer environment, we should be cautious before we adopt it in the learning environment. I was on this session for the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation around the applications of AR, VR for apprenticeship programs. Well, everyone was very excited. We have Oculus. We can expand clinical placements in the allied health professions now because we can rely on simulation. You have applications in the firefighter emergency response industry where it's much safer to use the AR, VR than in the simulation. There are these use cases where it makes sense to use different technologies to augment the learning experience. But the caveat is that if the learners gain those experiences and don't find them in the work environment, we're going to have a disconnect between the learning delivery and the skill requirements in the labor market. So I think here there is, again, a need to align technology and talent development. There are use cases. We should absolutely explore how AR, VR, and other technologies can improve learning outcomes for students, but we should do that in partnership with employer partners. We should really make sure we don't lose that connective glue in our maybe over eagerness to be early adopters of some of these new technologies.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah. And I know that our CIO at the college would 100% agree, and our provost who's in the audience also agree. And so with that, we made it through our official question set, which Liz said she saw, and we've modified it. But I think we have some time. We have about 10 minutes or so for questions. And so I think, do you want to use one of our microphones for that?
All right, do we have any audience questions? Right there.
I found the concept of the apprentices program very interesting, and I'd like you to elaborate on that, and also if Ian would elaborate on how that's being implemented at Pima.
So work-based learning is a spectrum, not a binary, so it's an apprenticeship or not. It ranges all the way from a job shadow, paid internship, which we recommend, all the way up through and including the gold standard, which would be federally recognized apprenticeship. And we say the gold standard because there's wage protections for the worker, there's all sorts of things that for small businesses can be quite complex. And so what we've learned in our own community is that the larger business and industry partners tend to want to be the sponsor, meaning own and operate the process of all of their own apprenticeship. But we've been very successful in helping small businesses do that. And so we started this launch about a year ago, and we're already up to 14 small business partners for whom we manage and run that apprenticeship. And they're predominantly in technology fields, but not always. In the state of Arizona, 80% of apprenticeships right now, or roughly approximately 80% of apprenticeships, are owned and operated by labor unions in the building and construction trades. And as you can imagine, in the very large city to the northwest of us. But we found a lot of opportunity in working, for example, with one of our rural agencies on an EMT apprenticeship. We also have a cyber IT apprenticeship, that one with Raytheon. And so the process is that there is a team now called, the team is Employer Engagement and Career Services in the Office of Apprenticeship at Pima Community College. But if you email workforce@pima.edu directly, you'll get somebody who will directly contact you to the right person that you need to talk with. And so we're early in our journey, but again, we're still the first college in Arizona. The only other one that's launched apprenticeships formally is Arizona Western College out of Yuma.
Hi, Ian.
Hey, Ryan.
I knew this question. You knew I would have a question, and Shalin, this has been a wonderful conversation. I think a lot about the challenges that in education dealing with workforce, because sometimes educators don't necessarily think of themselves as workforce preparation so much as educators, and then the students it's sort of incumbent on them to solve the rest. And meanwhile, you have industry that often is complaining about that they're not getting graduates who are ready for the workforce. They're not conversant in the language of business or, just the constraints. So there's sort of a triangle here, and maybe there's also policy and incentives that factor into all of this. So I'm interested in where have you seen examples of the best sort of triangle where you see the right policies and incentives, where you see industry that helps kind of meet education halfway, and where the educators are also out there working with industry?
I think this is a phenomenal question. Thank you very much for it. I'll start by saying that, employers are really key to support the delivery of the workforce development programming. And there is a need for employer skin in the game, financial skin in the game, and collaborative skin in the game. And, we have seen examples of some employers really eager to ask for programs from universities or from colleges, but they're not sort of supporting that co-creation delivery. So I think the policy instruments that are most exciting in aligning the education and employer needs are the ones that unlock the most success. The TACT grants, I think, were very successful in this regard. I think when it comes to the culture change of maybe faculty members seeing themselves as educators, I'm not a workforce development person. I'm an educator. I profess things. I'm a professor. When we look at public opinion polls of the public, of taxpayers, Republicans and Democrats, students, both K through 12, as well as adult learners, we see number one in those responses, I am going to college to find a job that gives me a livable wage. And, that is a change that I think more faculty members are coming around to. The Association of Public and Land-Grant Universities, which convenes all the public research universities like U of A, put out this report called Ready for Jobs, Ready for Careers, and Ready for a Lifetime. And that report really called out the false choice between career preparation and career readiness and a broad-based education, a curiosity-driven education. As a biology major who has found his way doing this, there's a lot of value in that curiosity-driven environment that happens in the education environment, and we ought to maintain that. But there are ways to bring in the workforce development complement, and I actually think the unlock there is work-based learning. Embedding work-based learning throughout the college experience and the university experience is a way of striking that balance. I might add something as well to the apprenticeship question, which I think ties into this. Ian mentioned labor unions. There is a need for unions to think differently about how they collaborate with community colleges and universities and employers as well to deliver workforce training. There's a lot of workforce dollars tied up in unions. The AFL-CIO, in response to that need, put out the report last month on strengthening union community college partnerships, which I thought was a very exciting development. There is sort of a transformation process that's also needing to happen in the labor community around partnerships with employers and educators to support this upskilling equation. I think in DC, there is a awareness of the need to strike this balance. Department of Education and Department of Labor are two separate departments for a reason. But there is increasing interest in bringing together the education system in the country with the workforce development system in the country and better coordinating those systems. So I think that's heartening. I think we're going to see more of it as we have the industrial policy dollars start flowing. Oh my gosh, I forgot to say, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that the National Science Foundation will also be announcing plans around its $200 million in semiconductor workforce development funding in the next couple of months. As a matter of fact, right after this meeting, I'm headed back to a workshop that the NSF is convening around strategizing those funds to maximize their impact. And no surprise, apprenticeships, work-based learning, and community colleges are three pillars of focus in the NSF strategy around the $200 million it was given from CHIPS to support the semiconductor workforce. So stay tuned for more on that. Yeah.
That was great, Shalin. I'm going to add a couple of local things before one last question, I think, Liz, and then we go. Locally, and I always hate to call out the shining stars because there's more than I'm going to mention. So if another company who's awesome at this is in the room and I didn't call them out, let me know afterwards and we'll somehow give appropriate accolades. But there are employers locally who have figured this out, what I'm about to say, everything that Shalin said, and the labor, we call it a labor market. We always refer to it as a labor market, but it's the only market that I know of where the quote supply, and I don't even like referring to workers as supply, but that's what it is. If it's a labor market, the workers are supply. It's the only market where the supply has a choice in the matter. And employers who understand that know that it's about investment in people at the end of the day. There's a manufacturer, AGM Container Controls, who I think really epitomizes this. We as an institution have honored their CEO, Howard Stewart, on a number of occasions with respect to the level of investment that he gives to his employees, and not only for jobs that are in his company. He pays for their education for wherever they want to go and whatever they want to do because of our proximity in the community and our affordability. 2/3 of those employees choose to attend Pima Community College. We've also started a great apprenticeship model with Leonardo Electrics, who has invested in that. And just recently, Northwest Hospital Systems invested a huge amount of money into educating and training nurses through Pima Community College. But how they're doing it is they're taking their lower skilled and lesser paid workforce and moving them through half on-site, half off-site nursing programs in partnership with Pima. So those are a couple, year after year, Raytheon continues to send a number of people our direction for a number of programs of studies. And I could go on, but there are employers who get it. There was one other question earlier also about when you hear if employers say we're not getting who we need. I've been in conversations where I'm in a room full of workforce developers, economic developers, and or employers, and they'll say, well, we're not getting who we need, and everybody turns and looks at the workforce person in the room. And my response usually is that in general, or are you referring to the people who are coming from our programs of study? And sometimes it is. Sometimes we're not perfect and we have something to fix. But with us, you will always find a way to yes, unless there's a real compelling reason that we have to say no.
Okay, we have time for one more question with a shorter answer. You guys could do all day, and I love it.
Hi, I'll try to be quick. Thinking about how you've kept sort of like the human aspect at the center of this conversation in many respects, what is the feasibility of a policy instrument that would incentivize more employers to prioritize not just the quality of the jobs themselves, but also the quality of life for their employees? Because, I'm fortunate where I love my job. Some of the jobs, even the new tech ones, like, people just aren't gonna like doing it. So what are some other incentives that could be used to still promote and push forward a more talented workforce?
Could you repeat the last part of that question? Incentivize employers to create quality jobs and?
Like quality jobs, but also quality work-life balance, where they'll have employees that want to work for them specifically so that they can also enjoy their life outside of work.
This is the million-dollar question. One thing that I would add to what Ian shared on just sort of employers turning to the workforce person and saying we're not getting what we need, there's also not only is the labor market a market in which the supply has a choice, but it's also a labor market in which that supply, so here's an example. Hawkeye Community College was called, and I'm calling on Hawkeye because we mentioned them in our report that we had worked on, but Hawkeye Community College had employers that it was working with that were complaining about not having adequate talent, or the talent would leave shortly after coming about from the college program. And Hawkeye was able to use labor market information data, real-time labor market information data in this case, actually scraping job postings to get a sense of demand instead of just relying on government data, which tends to be a year out of date or a year lagged. And what Hawkeye found is that the employers were losing the graduates of the college because other employers were offering more robust benefit packages and more competitive pay. The employers were not competitive for the supply of talent that was coming out of Hawkeye. Hawkeye Community College was doing an excellent job promoting economic mobility for its workers, but its employer partners really needed to see that data in order to boost their offerings to be more competitive in the labor market. So the CHIPS and Science Act was structured in a way that really incentivized employer-driven workforce strategies. Stan Litto, who's a trustee of the SUNY college system, wrote a great op-ed in Barron's to this effect. But I think more examples where we can elevate what Hawkeye did as some of these policy instruments are coming into place is what we need. The Department of Commerce and Labor put out a toolkit around job quality creation, but I think what we also need to think about is, job quality carrots and sticks in addition to the guidelines around the job quality creation. So thank you for that question. It was a really terrific question. Yeah. Ian?
All right.
Yes.
Thank you, Ian and Shalin. That was amazing. All right. So with that, it is time for happy hour.